Danger Zone.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's Kev Baker here. I am back live tonight on the Kev Baker Show, and I hope you've all had a good weekend. What a weekend I have had. Health problems kicking my butt, but we are back tonight. We're going to shake things up a little bit tonight. It's going to get a little bit different on here because Johnny whistles as well. He is under the weather, so I've given Johnny tonight off. Now, tonight's show might not be what everyone is expecting after the events that unfolded in London last night, where we had yet another terror attack, this time coming outside a mosque in Finsbury Park. Now, it's just far too easy for us to react in these situations in the immediate aftermath. And as I keep trying to tell the listeners of KBS, we need to let all the dust settle and look at all the facts before we do react. It's important for us not to react because that is exactly what the media are pushing us into. And you know, this attack at the mosque, the latest one, who knows what comes later, but this should come as no surprise as an agenda that has been pushed on us for a long time and one that has been hammered home to you out there often enough. You hear about me talking about clash of civilizations, order out of chaos. Let me just say right now that violence from any group, we condone that. Condemn that, sorry. Violence from any side begets violence. So then, we will address that on a later show. But tonight, I am joined by a returning guest, a very special guest indeed. And she is researcher, author, and public speaker, Elana Freeland. Now, Elana is the author of Chemtrails, HAARP, and the full spectrum dominance of planet Earth. And her follow-up to that book will be out in early 2018, and it's called Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to the Space Fence Lockdown. And before I go to Elana, the special treat tonight is, because Johnny Whistles has taken the night off, I've managed to persuade Anthony Patch to come in here and cover my six, because, Tony, you've been there for me throughout these health issues, and I need to thank you again tonight, brother, because you're going to be flying the KBS ship tonight.
Well, you don't have to twist my arm to come on here with you. I love it. You know, we're always quantum entangled, so I kind of knew you were going to do this anyway. Welcome, Elana.
Thank you. It's so good to be with both of you. Wow. Double treat.
It really is a double treat. I mean, Elana, last time we spoke to you, you were in the middle of doing the new book, Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to the Space Fence Lockdown. How's that coming along? All wrapped up?
All wrapped up. Still have to decide on illustrations with Feral House. But I feel really good. I went through and edited it. I think I edited it 3 times. And I recently sent you and Tony the chapter on CERN called The Temple of CERN. And I was so grateful to Tony for correcting a bit that I had wrong. I mean, that's what we need to do, is just really support each other in this work. We're all on the same team.
Well, we all try to be as accurate as we can, and we just help each other out. It is a collaboration, and so I don't take any credit. I'm just trying to help you, and you've helped me an awful lot. Kevin, I agree that, you know, part of our awakening took place because of your research way back when, having to do with HAARP.
Yeah. I mean, it's the new book. I spend the first 100 pages going back over what I had said in the first book, but there's been so much revealed since that 2014 book. I brought everything up to date to the best of my ability under Project Cloverleaf, and going on to quoting the various theories about how the chemtrail delivery is happening. I mean, we're still arguing about that. Is it a separate system? Is it coming out of the combustion chamber of the engine? And I quote several excellent people in the book on that. And then I I felt that I needed to go back into the theories that I now understand far better than when I wrote the first book. I've spent a lot of time going back over ether, the 19th century and previous centuries idea of the ether in space, and now also plasma. I mean, I don't think you can really look at this science without discussing plasma and what's being done in our atmosphere now. And then I also discussed scalar waves. And that was very much fun because I've studied Tom Bearden's ideas for several years now. And just to get an idea of how electromagnetics and scalar waves differ, as they do with, they differ with plasma and they differ with ether. So that's really important. And then the third chapter is nanotech. And I just want to, I won't go through the whole book, but I want to make clear that these three first chapters are essential to understanding how our atmosphere has been turned into, it's ionized, it's battery ready, it's an antenna, and we're breathing it. But what it means for us to be breathing it in, which leads to the third book I will write, and that hopefully will be the final book on this topic, which is on synthetic biology, because they all serve each other. And it's the synthetic biology. I mean, when I listen to your interviews, Tony and Kev, I'm constantly listening to looking at this incredible seminal crossing point in human history that we are all privileged to live in as watchmen at the gates, is how I think of us, to understand entirely how this not only is CERN taking down what has for ages been called the threshold or the veil between our dimension and parallel dimensions of other entities, other times, other places, but that this therefore is sort of a spiritual and physical crossover, just as we're breathing in the air that is the breath of life. At the same time, we're breathing in entities and chemical combinations that really are forcing us to that threshold that is dropping. And this has been a real revelation. Yes, I'm a student of Rudolf Steiner. Yes, I am a Christian. But for me, to really see science as at the crossing point of something that I have researched for over 2 decades, it's thrilling. And it's frightening because there's so much hinging on this time. And I can't help but feel that what life would I have lived had I not lived in this era, which is just screaming at me to donate and dedicate every hour of my intelligence and my passion and my love for this world. It's an amazing time, and I'm sure both of you would agree.
Oh, absolutely, Elana. You mentioned there about ionizing the atmosphere. And when I first came across your work, that's what I learned about HAARP. And then more recently, I've luckily started working with Mr. Patch, and he brought to me the world of CERN. Now, just one quote here I want to pinch from your Temple of CERN chapter, and it says it's from Dan Green, and it's the project manager. It's about these times we're living in, really, because he says we expect to see things that will change the way we view the universe. No one really knows what the machine will even give birth to. I mean, that's just symptomatic or emblematic of the times that you're describing we're living in now.
It is. And I mean, people ask me often how do I not get depressed? I'm sure you both get the same question. For me, I know whom I serve, and I know it's a living force that I serve that is very clear as to which side it stands on, and I have no fear of that, of anything to do with my personal self, but for the world, the idea I used to hear in the '60s among my New Age peers, where they felt that everything would turn out all right no matter what. That very strange faith that I never really shared, because I have always felt that you have to give 110% now, because we are in a crossover period. I mean, it's like if you think of a lemniscate, like a figure eight, and that crossover in the middle, that's where we are. That's the point we're all sort of standing on our tiptoes on, and it really makes it very easy to pursue what I call the impersonal life, where I'm giving as much as I can to this time, which so much of the future of humanity, the youths that I run into. My grandson lives here in town. He's 16 years old. These youths have no idea, for the most part, what they are facing, and as the genetics moves toward the places that are of cloning and cross species, it's unbelievable how fast it's all moving, and therefore I feel honored that I can do the research that at least I know people don't read anymore. At least that's how I feel, because things are moving so fast, and they've lost sight of what thinking and consciousness can really do. But I'm really writing these books, I realized in this second book, for the future, actually, as to what I witnessed in my time. I don't know, Tony, if you look at it that way when you write your books.
Well, you and I share a sense of urgency, and I think that that's where I somewhat are going to put you on the spot. Do you have a timeline in terms of the activities of what they're spraying in conjunction with the other technologies, including CERN, this thinning of the veil or lifting of the veil? I don't want to create a situation where you're being a date setter. I'm just talking about the season. Obviously, there's an awful lot that's ramping up very quickly here, and a lot that's already happened in the terraforming of our environment. But do you see this coming to a crescendo, to a focal point anytime in the near future?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I think we're living in it now. For me, the huge fact is that, I started out thinking about chemtrails, trying to figure out their chemical composition, calling on my biology background. Really learned a lot. And then with HAARP, learning about electromagnetics, learning how it's all been jiggled to make it so that the scalar aspect is hidden and no one knows about it, and why. And then, of course, I was very good friends with Clifford Carnicom, still am. I'll be going to see him next month in Idaho to talk with him about synthetic biology. And having, I think it was 8 years ago that I was leaning over his microscope in Santa Fe, looking at my blood and seeing the Morgellons creature, the cross-domain bacteria, munch the iron out of my red blood cells. It was a real wake-up moment that what is really going on is the internalization of the control mechanism over humanity. And it's these internal nanobots that are now loosed in us, genetically engineered. They have sensors, they have microprocessors, they can be remotely contacted, they can be, various frequencies can be pulsed into them. All of this has to do with, I think you were mentioning on what I was listening to in the Richie from Boston tape this morning was the Elon Musk mesh that he's pushing. It all has to,
the neural
yes,
lace.
The neural lace, and I know that's how Morgellons works. It appears as a fiber, enters the body through the lungs, goes into the bloodstream, goes beyond the blood-brain barrier, and what it does with its cohorts, because it is a hive mind, is it produces a mesh in that sort of simulates the human tissue and various parts of the internal. But then it actually, in the scalp at least, takes the place of the actual tissue. So I think what's happening, and this to me is the seminal moment, is that it is internalized now. I think they've been, and I spend the second part of the Space Fence book talking about the ground basis for the space fence. And the space fence is basically your Saturn ring around the Earth being semi-produced, being produced primarily by sounding rockets, and the aluminum oxide, the lithium, and titanium that they're taking up there with them, and that gradually settles into a spinning ring around the equator. I tend to think that this is that it was getting the ground system up, and then adding the Kwajalein Atoll infrastructure to the space fence, which, as you may recall, is really was introduced back with the Strategic Defense Initiative under Reagan, Bush, and Cheney. But now it's here with a vengeance because the sky is ionized, the atmosphere is ionized, which makes it a perfect time to really stack this ionized mechanism all the way from the ionosphere along the magnetic lines of force and the Birkeland currents, etc., through the disk. Billy Hayes calls it a CD disk around the equator, and down into the radar installations, the NEXRADs, the cell towers, etc., that constitute the ground infrastructure. And then the culminating part is that we have internalized the heavy metals, the conductive metals, the nanobots for contact all the way through the space fence lockdown. That's how I see them doing it. And yes, they are. I follow you very closely, Tony, because you're keeping track of CERN in a way that I completely resonate with, in a way, the mythical side of it, as I entitled the chapter, The Temple of CERN. I absolutely agree that you have deep black magic going on there, and people have to get over their conditioning when they hear the words black magic, that we're not talking just little witches and warlocks. We're talking the science that Arthur Clarke said is often misconstrued as magic, or vice versa. So this is deep magic, and the magicians are very happy with themselves. And yeah, they might be having a tussle here and there with their pedophile networks and President Trump's attempts to oust their cabal. But basically, this is home free, because we're all struggling out here to find a way to deal with what is internal as a condition of the heavy metals and the Morgellons creatures. We're like Tony Pantalaresco, we're all looking for remedies, ways to keep going. I'm in touch with a lot of people that have Morgellons. I hear from them now and then, and their struggles. I find this to be the time. And I did hear you talk about the what's it called? What's it called when everybody leaves?
Oh, the rapture.
The rapture, yes, sorry. And I don't resonate with that, but I do feel that I'm not sure we're in the end times, but I do feel that we are at a seminal moment in which the gates of hell are being opened, in the sense of the veils, the threshold that has kept us safe so that we can have human consciousness evolution here. And now we are confronted with challenges that demand that we develop an inner life, that demand we turn inward and really build some structure inside that will last as it's buffeted by the winds of this time. And I feel that's a blessing in a way, that it's no longer a time of entitlement and personal, so-called personal growth. It's not just about personality now. It's really, whom do you serve? As the great question from the Parsifal myth resonates through me. Whom do you serve? I mean, this is humanity fighting for the right to evolve in its own time and to have the free will to make those decisions as to how it's going to conduct its life, for better or worse. And that's kind of the problem I see now with the cyborg and trying to turn us all into the hive mind via these internal structures that we have breathed in. This is our problem. And so that's what I try to represent as I go and give talks. And though I don't write on the spiritual level like you do, and I do admire you for doing that, I think that anyone who reads my work can see that I'm really talking on multiple levels.
Yep.
Those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear will be able to discern that. And I take more liberties in the Space Fence book than I did in the Chemtrails HAARP book. And I will take even more liberties in the synthetic biology book, because now we're down to the skinny. This is our bodies, and our subtle bodies, and our minds, and our children, and the children of our children's children. So, I'm going to take the gloves off in the third book.
Well, I'm glad you're doing that, because it's necessary now. We have to be in their face. I hear you overall describing their agenda as so far along, it almost feels like there's not much we can do. We have about 2 minutes before we go to our first hard break. And over that break, I'd like you to sort of think about this question, and that is, what can we do about it individually, personally, for ourselves as individuals, our families, our loved ones, and our circle of influence? Who we care about, and what can we do to counteract, to reverse, to heal, to prevent further intrusion of this, be it Morgellons, be it deactivation EM-wise. Really, we try as much as we can. Yeah, it can be very depressing, as you said earlier, to look at all of this research, as you and I do, and Kev. So that I'd like you to come back after the break with as best a solution-oriented discussion as we can move into during the second half. Go ahead, sir.
Listening to here and how it all ties together, because I've got the benefit of speaking to so many guests and listening to Elana. It fits in with your research like a jigsaw. It really does. And the picture that we're painting here really is the fact that these dark magicians, for there is no better term for them, they're literally terraforming this planet around us for this new age that they're trying to drag us into.
Right. That's exactly what they're doing.
Is this a movement towards rebuilding what they consider to be their golden age, that golden age of Kronos that you and I have talked about so often?
I think that's a great way to look at it, through the Brotherhoods. I mean, I do more about the Brotherhoods in my Sub Rosa America historical series. I look deeply at brotherhoods and their influence and impact, particularly on this great hope of a nation that once was, whether you look at it as Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, or you look at it as an attempt at a true democratic republic, it doesn't really matter because it's gone. It's gone now. And part of the problem is the secrecy of these brotherhoods and cabals that have ruined this country.
And we are right on the break. We've got Elana Freeland and Anthony Patch on the Kev Baker Show tonight. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in 3 short moments. Stay tuned.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back to all you KBS listeners out there. I am joined tonight by Elana Freeland, the author of Chemtrails, HAARP and Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth, and her soon-to-be-released book, Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to the Space Fence Lockdown. Now, in a special treat tonight, guest hosting with me is Mr. Anthony Patch. You can find his work over at anthonypatch.com. And Tony, before we go anywhere, before we get back into this, we've got a very special show coming up here on Wednesday night. You've only managed to go and organise L.A. Marzulli to come on, man.
Well, L.A. enjoyed our conversation so much, he asked if he could come back on, and he's flying back from Peru as we speak. And he is going to bring us the latest news from his adventures down south on Wednesday. Unfortunately, I have a last-minute change to my schedule, so I will not be able to join the two of you Wednesday. However, L.A. is more than happy to speak with you, and he has some DNA research that he's been doing. I don't know if he's going to publicly discuss that or not, but that's a second part of the agenda as to what took place in Peru. And they have a conference coming together in 2018 in Peru, a guided tour, if you will, and I'm sure he will speak to that on Wednesday.
And that's on Wednesday night right here on KBS. And what a hard life I've got interviewing Elana Freeland. I've got L.A. Marzulli coming up. And just quickly, from now on, every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, myself, Tony and Whistles will be joining forces. Tony's going to come on KBS and help me out while I'm still in recovery mode. So lots to look forward to. And with so much news to break all the time, there's going to be something new for you every single show. So Elana, let's get back into this. And before we go anywhere, where can people get a hold of your book and where can they order the new one?
Well, I heard that the new one is up. Feral House put it up, and people can go to Amazon.com and find it with the title Under an Ionized Sky, Elana Freeland, and pre-order it. And then as for the Chemtrails HAARP book, it is on Amazon as well, or at Feral House, and you can get it there. And I think you can get it at your bookstore. They may have to order it from their distributor, but Feral House provides many distributors, so I assume you could get it there too.
And Tony, you posed a brilliant question before the break, because here on TFR, it can be deemed as fear porn sometimes, but I like the fact that all the hosts on this network, we try as best we can to provide some kind of solutions. And the question that you posed to Elana, I'll just hand it back to you, sir, because how do we face this terraforming of the planet?
Yeah, because all of this can be very overwhelming. And when we start talking about the fact that they're so far along in their combined agendas that seem to be coalescing to a fine point, we have to kind of hunker down and say, well, gee, how do I take care of myself? What pills can I take? Do I wrap tin foil around my head? Do I put duct tape around my windows and my doors and shelter in place? What do you think, Elana?
No, it's true. It's a real challenge for many of us, and most of the chemtrail movement now, such as it is, I don't know if it's a movement. Is it, when something is limited to the internet and Facebook, is it a movement? Certainly, there are thousands of people now 3,000 of them are at my site, who are going from site to site, looking at the sky, looking at photos of the sky, sending in photos of the sky, going further than the weather engineering that's going on, going into deeper agendas of the military-industrial intelligence complex that works for and with the global elites. Many people are ill. They're either having chem flu or having outbreaks of the Morgellons creature. And of course, I want to clarify that there aren't just a few people who have breathed this in. We live in one atmosphere. I assume we all have breathed in, except that I am not certain. It's still an open question to me. Is what is being sprayed over one geographic area the same as what is being sprayed over another geographic area? This is not entirely clear to me. I'm thinking of when Oregon recently, a previous chemtrails activist, wrote a wonderful essay about it. She was contacted, she and two other people were contacted by a whistleblower who worked for the state weather system, who told them that they were now being used for lithium experiments over the coast of Oregon, and that they should watch themselves. And they were having bouts of dizziness and strange dreams and various symptoms. So I do know that that various areas are perhaps sprayed differently. That said, let's assume we have all breathed in these nanobots known as Morgellons and probably others, including fungi from the upper atmosphere, from the stratosphere, which our immune system it's entirely new to our immune system. Okay, there's our challenge. Now, for me, I'm a big diet person. I've been macrobiotic, and I studied Chinese medicine for 6 years when I was younger. I've used this. I haven't gone to a doctor since I was 13. I'll be 70 in 2 days. Yay! Whatever that means. And I'm very much into using food as medicine. So I attempt to keep my body alkaline, and I cheat, and I fall off the wagon, but I always get back on. And all foods either run acid or alkaline or balanced. Same thing with what one drinks. So that's something people can watch for. It is Clifford proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that the Morgellons creature, he had many petri dishes and was treating each one differently. Each culture was treated differently, and it was obvious that they thrive on acidity, and they They go into stasis and do not reproduce when in an alkaline condition. So that's one plus on our side. It requires looking at your body as a little petri dish or as a little chemical lab, but that's taking responsibility for your health and not feeding into the medical empire and big pharma. And I think that can only be a good thing. It requires learning new tricks, looking at your lifestyle, deciding how you're going to live in a way that is going to keep your body as the temple of the living spirit in good shape into old age. And I guess I'm getting to old age, gosh. But everything's going well here. Another thing, Tony Pantalaresco, I mentioned him. Tony is a scientist. He's on fire for pursuing particularly the Morgellons situation. And he has, he tells you how to build ionized foot baths. He has recommended different things for baths, hip baths that can be taken that cause these nano bots. And I stress the part nano. These are very, very tiny. They're submicron. And we have millions and trillions of them in the atmosphere. Our government and other governments perhaps have dropped them from the stratosphere as sensors, as microprocessors, and they eventually have fallen to the earth. So we have those two, not just the Morgellons, to consider getting out of our bodies so that our liver can get a good rest, our gallbladder, all the organs that are working for our health can continue to do so. So it's kind of exciting. We all share various ideas, and gee, this worked with me, and oh, it didn't work with me. This worked with me though, and it's gotten pretty. I won't say that we're all overjoyed by this situation, but it is obvious that we have come together in a healing sort of community to share discoveries as to what to do, because I have no simple solution as to how to stop this. I do not think marching in the street and waving signs will help. I did not expect President Trump to stop it immediately, even when he at least saw through the typical climate change argument. There's just too many perks for the military-industrial intelligence complex to this technology. If you haven't heard me before or heard someone else say it, what comes of an ionized atmosphere is what the military calls C4, command, control, communications, and cyber warfare. This is tremendous power to build a wireless world so that you have the cloud high above that you can utilize, and then to drop nanomaterials that can storm the blood-brain barrier easily and can be remotely contacted and influenced. This is a tremendous amount of power. So there's no way that they're going to stop keeping the sky ionized. And so it behooves us to get real smart and real wily, smart like a fox, to figure out how we can live with this, not just exist, but thrive. And it will require some lifestyle changes, but that's okay. That's not the end of the world. So I don't know. I had my first outbreak of Morgellons on my right calf about 6 weeks ago, and I'm still tending it. And it's like having my own little private lab right on my leg. So I'm trying this and I'm trying that. And, I notice immediately if I have too much acidity, too many spices in Mexican food, too many tomatoes, I notice right away that everything gets very active down there. So it's a good, it's like having my little taskmaster to keep me on the straight and narrow.
Tony, well, I always go back to Elon Musk, right? You know me, I've got a love affair with the guy, a love-hate affair. But when I'm hearing about Morgellons and things like that, it almost renders his neural lace totally inept, because they could literally have laced us with the tech right now.
Well, that's what I thought when I heard him, and when I heard you, Tony, say that either that this might be a culminating type of thing where you can get really special if you can get this mesh, but the Morgellons itself is programmed because it's genetically engineered. It's half organic, half inorganic. It is programmed to create a mesh in the body that recapitulates the tissue development, the cell development. Yeah, very, very wily kind of technology.
And you've heard me talk with Kev and other people about nanoparticles actually changing our DNA and creating a third strand of DNA. Do you see any of that in your research?
Well, you're the primary person that I listen to about that. And as far as the DNA, the only other person I know talking about it, and I don't know why people have such trouble with him, is Harold Kautzvella. And Harold is the guy who has promoted the idea of black goo, which I don't really...
Yeah, I've tried to get him on lots, Elana.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm in touch with him. I could push things a little, maybe.
Please do. Oh, please do.
But I mean, he's the only other one I know of, certainly in the chemtrails movement, who is discussing the impact of this stuff coming down on us and the electro-optics in it that are impacting our DNA. Because as you know, Tony, the DNA is just a little antenna.
Yep, exactly.
So he's the guy. And
Okay.
he has, I'll send you the paper he presented a couple of years ago, and I quote him in the book, in the Space Fence book, about fuel, because he talks about pyrolysis, which does make electro-optics an option of the various metals in the fuel. They are completely transformed in the engine chamber. And then I will quote him again in the synthetic biology book, not so much for the black goo, though I feel I must at least cover it a bit. I really don't understand the black goo at all, but I do understand what he has said about Morgellons, and it's very, very good.
Okay, going back to a solution, you'd mentioned iron in terms of the Morgellons under the microscope consuming the iron in your blood. Is that something you recommend as a supplement?
Not really. I think our answer is I'm not a fan of supplements. I'm a fan of natural foods. And it's kind of, we're caught between a rock and a hard place there, because certainly everything falling from the sky is falling on inorganic gardening and organic gardening. And as you know, the GMOs have been taken up by the wind and spread to kingdom come. So what is natural food now? What I was listening to someone talk about going to the supermarket with her little 60 microscope. I have one of those too, a tiny little thing that's really great. And looking at the vegetables in the organic section of the supermarket and seeing the Morgellons fibers. I mean, they're very tiny. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. So, but I still believe that if you want iron, and having studied Chinese medicine, there's a transmutation that takes place in oxidation. And if you eat green vegetables, which are high in magnesium, in the process of oxidation, the chemical formula is sort of written in my head right here because I've memorized it, you will produce iron. So iron pills tend to be sort of overkill and to mess up, make people constipated and all sorts of things. I highly recommend seeing what will help your iron, because as you probably know, we're 16% less oxygen now than we were 2 decades ago. So I assume that's part of the reason, is that certainly the red blood cells I looked at under Clifford's microscope from about a sampling of 20 people, it not only takes the iron out, but it makes the red blood cells turn into strange shapes. Mm-hmm. So in order to keep our body natural, I highly recommend eating natural foods.
Okay.
And remember, when you're eating meat and dairy, those animals have sucked in the same stuff we're sucking in, and they're expelling it through their milk products, not just their urine and feces and sweat. And you will be doubling up your intake. That's why I'm recommending to people to eat less meat than they're accustomed to.
Okay. The reduction in the red blood cells affects our mental capacities, our cognition, our critical thinking skills. So
much. That's so true. And we see that everywhere, don't we? I mean, there are so many influences now dumbing us down, preparing us for the hive mind. It is unfortunate. But as far as for the oxygen, what do I do? Well, a brisk walk. And by all means, be wary of precipitation from the sky. I highly recommend in snow or rain not to go out the first hour, because the first hour will be loaded with these nanoparticles coming down from the upper atmosphere.
It's almost like a protocol for nuclear fallout.
It is, except hiding under our desk won't help us. That's what they did with us when we were kids. Get under your desk in case the Russians drop the bomb on us.
Yeah, well, I'm almost 64, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, so are you, I'm being flippant here, but are you going to write a cookbook?
Whoa, I hadn't gotten that far. I don't know. I mean, I think I eat very little. I notice as I get older, my appetite is not as much. And now that I have my own little Morgellons beaker on my leg, I'm eating very carefully, and you know, if I eat out, I can expect that I'm going to pay the next day because every restaurant is trying to, you know, serve their bottom line, and it's probably GMO foods, and GMOs are part of the delivery system. They're not separate.
Indeed.
Yeah, they're part of it, and the vaccinations. I'm sure they're piggybacking the same stuff because, see, Tony. I need to emphasize this, guys. What they're dropping, the chemical signature of what they're dropping here in our atmosphere in order to maintain this little ionosphere in touch with the greater ionosphere, they are doing with that space fence ring around the planet. They want it all contiguous. So it's the same signature. Mm-hmm. And that's the same signature in our bodies.
So you're literally stacking from, let's say, the nanoscale all the way out to the cosmological scale is what you're saying. They're stacking the ionosphere.
It's all the nanos up there, all the nanos here, all the nanos in my bloodstream and brain. They all have a similar chemical signature so that they will all resonate at the same frequency when it's pulsed.
So is that why we see the Schumann resonance changing? Are they kind of playing with that as well, or is that just a natural?
Oh, yeah, because they're impacting the Schumann well around the planet. But that gets into CERN territory because of the magnetosphere. Mm-hmm. But this resonance, it's like a good example is Billy Hayes. Whenever HAARP used to be fired up, or this other radar system near his house would be fired up, he would go into grand mal seizures because he was the tower man for building and constructing these systems, and he too was programmed to the same pulse.
Oh wow!
And his body is still programmed to that same pulse, and that's why he goes into seizures.
So what you're describing here is an electromagnetic system that can be triggered, let's just say generically, through a Wi-Fi immersion system that we've talked about, but it can be triggered and transmitted anyway. But the point is, I think you're saying here is that they're creating this hive mind to control the greater 99% of the population. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's why I call it space fence lockdown. The space fence, if you read about it, they'll tell you, oh yeah, we're counting debris in space so that our 22,000 or whatever satellites don't run into these things. It's all, it's a defensive mode. Well, probably Putin and China and everyone, they all know that's nonsense. But what's really going on is it's surveillance beyond belief all the way to the DNA level, right, because of this technology that we are breathing in that is contiguous with the technology in our atmosphere and around the planet.
We have about 2 minutes. Do you see that there's going to be a specific time in which they're going to throw a switch for this hive mentality, or do you see it more as just this continual progression towards that endpoint?
Well, I'm really closely watching to the degree I can various city, like this thing going on in London now. Mm-hmm. I would be foolish to think that they were not experimenting with the pulsing of frequencies. They can stack frequencies to affect a whole lot of things all at once, not just a bad mood or a violent mood or a pacific mood. They can stack them and then pulse a population center and then see what happens. I mean, if it's anything like the weather engineering that we just went through 2 decades of, they did tons of experiments. They did hurricanes, they did tsunamis, they did tornadoes, they did floods, they did droughts. These were all experimental, and I could follow them, and I'd know exactly what the objective of that one experiment was, or at least I felt I did.
Sure.
Now, if they're doing the same thing, now that the space fence is up, and I'm sure it's up, now they've fine-tuned HAARP, they've recalibrated all the different instruments of the ground works for the space fence. They've all been calibrated. That includes fracking, that includes wind farms, that includes everything, and it must include what's in us as well.
Okay, we have about a minute to go. I'm going to turn it over to Kev, but I think we need to have you back on, and what I would like to do is to venture into the world of artificial intelligence and fold that into your research.
Yes, that would be fabulous.
Well,
Kev, it's your show. Wrap it up.
What a show, ladies and gentlemen. If, like me, you're sitting there with your jaw hitting the ground, I don't blame you. I'm going to have to listen to this one again. Elana Freeland and Anthony Patch. Amazing stuff. Now, don't forget, you can also get Entangled e-magazine featuring yours truly, Anthony Patch, and a whole host of other people over at anthonypatch.com. And I will be back tomorrow night with Chad and Alta Dillard, the follow-up to Orbduction. Oh, I cannot wait. Until then, wherever you are, make it TFR.
Incredible seminal crossing point in human history that we are all privileged to live in as watchmen at the gates is how I think of us. To understand entirely how this not only is CERN taking down what has for ages been called the threshold or the veil between our dimension and parallel dimensions of other entities, other times, other places, but that this therefore is sort of a spiritual and physical crossover, just as we're breathing in the air that is the breath of life. At the same time, we're breathing in entities and chemical combinations that really are forcing us to that threshold that is dropping. And this has been a real revelation. Yes, I'm a student of Rudolf Steiner. Yes, I am a Christian. But for me, to really see science as at the crossing point of something that I have researched for over 2 decades. It's thrilling and it's frightening because there's so much hinging on this time, and I can't help but feel that what life would I have lived had I not lived in this era, which is just screaming at me to donate.
This is the Cam Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's Kev Baker here. I am back live tonight on the Kev Baker Show, and I hope you've all had a good weekend. What a weekend I have had. Health problems kicking my butt, but we are back tonight. We're going to shake things up a little bit tonight. It's going to get a little bit different on here because Johnny whistles as well. He is under the weather, so I've given Johnny tonight off. Now, tonight's show might not be what everyone is expecting after the events that unfolded in London last night, where we had yet another terror attack, this time coming outside a mosque in Finsbury Park. Now, it's just far too easy for us to react in these situations in the immediate aftermath. And as I keep trying to tell the listeners of KBS, we need to let all the dust settle and look at all the facts before we do react. It's important for us not to react because that is exactly what the media are pushing us into. And you know, this attack at the mosque, the latest one, who knows what comes later, but this should come as no surprise as an agenda that has been pushed on us for a long time and one that has been hammered home to you out there often enough. You hear about me talking about clash of civilizations, order out of chaos. Let me just say right now that violence from any group, we condone that.
And I recently sent you and Tony the chapter on CERN called The Temple of CERN. And I was so grateful to Tony for correcting a bit that I had wrong. I mean, that's what we need to do, is just really support each other in this work. We're all on the same team.
Well, we all try to be as accurate as we can, and we just help each other out. It is a collaboration. And so I don't take any credit. I'm just trying to help you, and you've helped me an awful lot. Kevin, I agree that, you know, part of our awakening took place because of your research way back when, having to do with HAARP.
Yeah. I mean, it's the new book. I spend the first 100 pages going back over what I had said in the first book, but there's been so much revealed since that 2014 book. I brought everything up to date to the best of my ability under Project Cloverleaf, and going on to quoting the various theories about how the chemtrail delivery is happening. I mean, we're still arguing about that. Is it a separate system? Is it coming out of the combustion chamber of the engine? And I quote several excellent people in the book on that. And then I felt that I needed to go back into the theories that I now understand far better than when I wrote the first book. I've spent a lot of time going back.
Condemn that, sorry. Violence from any side begets violence. So then, we will address that on a later show. But tonight, I am joined by a returning guest, a very special guest indeed, and she is researcher, author, and public speaker, Elana Freeland. Now, Elana is the author of Chemtrails, HAARP, and the full spectrum dominance of planet Earth. And her follow-up to that book will be out in early 2018, and it's called Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to the Space Fence Lockdown. And before I go to Elana, the special treat tonight is, because Johnny Whistles has taken the night off, I've managed to persuade Anthony Patch to come in here and cover my six, because Tony, you've been there for me throughout these health issues, and I need to thank you again tonight, brother, because you're going to be flying the KBS ship tonight.
Well, you don't have to twist my arm to come on here with you. I love it. You know, we're always quantum entangled, so I kind of knew you were going to do this anyway. Welcome, Elana.
Thank you. It's so good to be with both of you. Wow, double treat.
It really is a double treat. I mean, Elana, last time we spoke to you, you were in the middle of doing the new book, Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to the Space Fence Lockdown. How's that coming along? All wrapped up?
All wrapped up. Still have to decide on illustrations with Feral House, but I feel really good. I went through and edited it. I think I edited it 3 times over ether, the 19th century and previous centuries idea of the ether in space, and now also plasma. I mean, I don't think you can really look at this science without discussing plasma and what's being done in our atmosphere now. And then I also discussed scalar waves. And that was very much fun because I've studied Tom Bearden's ideas for several years now. And just to get an idea of how electromagnetics and scalar waves differ, as they do with, they differ with plasma and they differ with ether. So that's really important. And then the third chapter is nanotech. And I just want to, I won't go through the whole book, but I want to make clear that these three first chapters are essential to understanding how our atmosphere has been turned into, it's ionized, it's battery ready, it's an antenna, and we're breathing it. But what it means for us to be breathing it in, which leads to the third book I will write, and that hopefully will be the final book on this topic, which is on synthetic biology, because they all serve each other. And it's the synthetic biology. I mean, when I listen to your interviews, Tony and Kev, I'm constantly listening to the looking at this